In the midst of a hectic day, a struggling single mom is determined to make ends meet while juggling her responsibilities. When she encounters a stranded car with a flat tire, she offers her help without hesitation. Later, she's stunned to learn that the man behind the wheel is a reclusive billionaire, disillusioned with superficial relationships, a man in search of genuine, real love. As their worlds unexpectedly collide, their brief encounter turns into a transformative journey, challenging both to break free from societal stereotypes and rediscover the true meaning of connection and self-worth. A weathered tire iron slips from grease-stained fingers as rain begins to patter on the cracked asphalt. Emma Matthews, 42, glances at her watch, 20 minutes until her daughter's school pickup. Her knuckles, rough from years of self-reliance, grip the tool tighter as she returns to the flat tire. Nearby, a man in a disheveled business suit watches, silently, his expensive watch catching the grey afternoon light. "I've changed more tires than I've had proper vacations," she jokes with a tired smile that carries the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Neither realizes this mundane moment on a forgotten stretch of road will alter the course of both their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain fell in a gentle rhythm against the windows of Turning Page Books, the small, independent bookstore where Emma Matthews had worked for the past 7 years. Located on Main Street in the heart of Meadowbrook, their store was a cherished community fixture, a warm beacon of stories and possibilities, much like Emma herself. At 42, Emma carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered life's storms and emerged stronger, if a bit more weathered. Her chestnut hair, streaked with premature silver strands she couldn't afford to color, was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Behind her wire-rimmed glasses, her hazel eyes, bright and observant, revealed a sharp intelligence and warm humor that life's hardships hadn't managed to dim. "Mrs. Davenport will be in at 3 for the cookbook she ordered," Emma reminded. Her boss, Gerald, a retired English professor in his 70s who had opened the store after deciding he wasn't quite ready for a life without literature. "And I organized the new shipment of historical fiction in the display window like you asked." Gerald nodded appreciatively, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "What would I do without you, Emma? You're the backbone of this place." Emma smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. The praise was nice, but it wouldn't help with this month's heating bill. The bookstore job covered basics, but as a single mother with a 15-year-old daughter headed toward college, basics weren't enough anymore. "I'm heading out for my lunch break," she said, checking her watch. "Then I've got to run to the bank. Before my shift ends at 3, parent-teacher conference at 4. "Take your time," Gerald said kindly, knowing full well the intricate juggling act that constituted Emma's daily life. Outside, Emma's ancient Honda Civic waited faithfully, its once blue paint faded to a nondescript gray, much like the October sky above. She patted the dashboard affectionately as the engine protested before sputtering to life. "Just a few more years, old girl," she murmured. "Just get Lily through high school." Lily Matthews was the center of Emma's universe. Her reason for pushing through exhaustion, for working 2 jobs, for maintaining the increasingly fragile facade that everything was fine. At 15, Lily was everything Emma could have hoped for. Intelligent, kind, with a quiet determination that mirrored her mother's. But lately, the college brochures, arriving in their mailbox, had become a source of both pride and panic. Ivy League dreams required Ivy League money. Emma's phone buzzed as she navigated toward the bank. "Mom, can you bring my science project board? When you come to the conference, I left it on my bed." Lily's text was followed by a heart emoji that made Emma smile. "Will do. See you at 4. Emma typed back, making a mental note to add it to her already complicated afternoon schedule. At the bank, Emma sat across from a loan officer whose sympathetic smile didn't match the rejection letter he slid across the desk. "I'm sorry, Ms. Matthews. With your current debt-to-income ratio and the second job being relatively new, we just can't approve a home equity loan at this time." He lowered his voice. "Between us, have you considered refinancing your mortgage instead?" Emma's laugh held no humor. "That would require having a mortgage, Mr. Parker. My landlord raised the rent again last month." She gathered her paperwork with practiced dignity. "Thank you for your time." Back in her car, Emma allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of frustration, a luxury she permitted only in private. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of financial strain pressed down on her shoulders. 30 seconds, then she straightened, adjusted her rearview mirror, and drove on. Self-pity was an indulgence she couldn't afford. Across town, in a sleek glass high-rise that seemed to exist in a different universe. From Emma's world, Daniel Harrison absently swirled an untouched glass of 18-year-old Scotch. At 45, he had accumulated more wealth than most people would see in several lifetimes. As the founder and CEO of Harrison Innovations, a tech company specializing in sustainable energy solutions, his net worth had surpassed the billion-dollar mark 3 years ago. The financial papers called him the invisible billionaire, partly for his revolutionary transparent solar panels, but mostly for his notorious reclusiveness. After a high-profile divorce 5 years earlier, Daniel had retreated from public life, focusing solely on his work and avoiding the society circuit that had once dominated his calendar. The Tokyo investors are confirmed for next week's video call. His executive assistant Vivian informed him as she placed a stack of reports on his desk. After a decade working together, she was one of the few people who could read his moods. Today, she noted the slight furrow between his brows, the distracted way he nodded without meeting hers. "And your sister called. Again. She says if you miss Thanksgiving this year, she'll come drag you there herself." This at least earned a small smile. "Tell Olivia I'll think about it." "You said that last year," Vivian reminded him. Her tone gentle but pointed. Daniel glanced out at the panoramic view of the city below, a city full of people living their lives, connecting, arguing, loving, while he sat in his tower, increasingly isolated. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built a fortune creating technology that brought sustainable energy to millions. Yet he couldn't seem to power his own life anymore. "Is there anything else on the schedule today?" he asked, already knowing the answer. There was always more work to be done, more meetings to attend, more innovations to approve. The charity board meeting at 4, then dinner with the R&D team at 7, Vivian replied, studying him with concern. "But I could reschedule if you need some time." Daniel waved off her suggestion. "No need, I'll be fine." It was his standard response, regardless of whether it was true. After Vivian left, Daniel loosened his tie and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, people moved like ants along the streets of Meadowbrook, the small city where he'd chosen to headquarter his company rather than New York or San Francisco. He'd grown up here, left for Stanford, then returned to build something that might make a difference. Somewhere along the way, the meaningful connections he'd hoped to maintain had slipped away, replaced by business relationships and superficial interactions colored by his wealth. His ex-wife, Claudia, had accused him of emotional unavailability during their divorce proceedings. "You're more married to your company than you ever were to me," she'd said, not entirely unfairly. The tabloids had a field day with their split, portraying him as either the cold-hearted titan or the victim of a gold digger, depending on their particular slant. The truth, as always, was more complex and far less sensational. Daniel's phone chimed with a text from his sister. "Thanksgiving, yes or no? The kids miss their Uncle Dan. I miss my brother." He smiled ruefully at the photo she'd attached, her 3 children making exaggerated, sad faces. Olivia had always been his anchor to normalcy, refusing to treat him differently despite his success. Her husband Mark, a high school history teacher, still ribbed him mercilessly about his fancy cars and insisted on paying for dinner whenever. They met, still deciding. "We'll let you know soon," he typed back, knowing his sister would see through the evasion, but would give him space nonetheless. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harrison, your car is ready downstairs." Daniel gathered his coat, deciding suddenly that he needed to drive himself today rather than being chauffeured. Sometimes the act of driving, of physically controlling his own direction, was the only thing that made him feel grounded. As Emma rushed out of the bank and back to her car, a quick glance at her watch confirmed her fears. She was running late. The parent-teacher conference was in 45 minutes. She still needed to pick up Lily's science project from home, and she had promised to bring cupcakes for the drama club meeting afterward. The mental calculations of time versus obligations made her head spin. Just as she reached for her car door, her phone rang. The screen displayed Valleyside Diner, her evening job as a waitress. "Emma, I hate to ask, but Debbie called in sick. Any chance you could come in at 6 instead of 8 tonight?" Marge, the diner's manager, sounded apologetic but hopeful. Emma closed her eyes briefly, mentally rearranging her evening. "I can make it by 6:30, she offered, knowing the extra hours would help with next month's utility bill. "I have Lily's drama club until 6. "You're a lifesaver, hun. See you then." Hanging up, Emma allowed herself a moment to breathe before starting the car. The check engine light flickered on as she pulled out of the parking lot. Another problem. To add to her growing list of concerns, 3 blocks from the bank, the car began to make an ominous rattling sound. "Not now," Emma pleaded, patting the dashboard as if soothing a temperamental child. "Just get me through today." The car responded by shuddering violently before the steering suddenly became heavy in her hands. Emma managed to guide the sputtering vehicle to the curb before it died completely, a thin plume of steam rising from under the hood. "Perfect," she muttered, resting her forehead against the steering wheel. This was not an expense she had budgeted for. Not this month, not with winter clothes still to buy for Lily and the electricity bill running high from the early cold snap. Popping the hood, Emma stepped out into the brisk autumn air. She was no mechanic, but years of maintaining Thijing Honda had taught her a few basics. The problem was immediately apparent: a burst radiator hose. Fixable, but not quickly, and not without parts she didn't have. Emma checked her watch again and calculated. If she called for a tow now, she'd miss the parent-teacher conference. If she tried to fix it temporarily, she might make it, but risk further damage to the car she couldn't afford to replace. Pulling out her phone, she was about to call Gerald to see if he could possibly give her a ride when she heard the smooth purr of an expensive engine slowing beside her. A sleek black Tesla pulled to the curb, its tinted window rolling down to reveal a man about her age, his expression concerned. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice rich and deep. Emma straightened, instinctively smoothing her hair. "Just a burst radiator hose. I've got it handled, but thank you." The man studied her for a moment, then surprised her by pulling over completely and stepping out of his car. He wore no tie with his crisp white shirt and charcoal suit, and his dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Despite his obvious wealth, the car alone probably cost more than she made in years. There was something approachable about him. "Daniel," he said simply, extending his hand. "Emma," she replied, accepting the handshake. His palm was warm and surprisingly calloused for a man driving such an expensive car. "Mind if I take a look? I used to restore classic cars in another life." Before Emma could protest, he was already peering under the hood, his suit jacket now folded neatly on the passenger seat of his Tesla. There was something strangely comforting about his competent movements, the way he assessed the damage without commentary or judgment. "Radiator hose, like you said," he confirmed, rolling up his sleeves to reveal strong forearms. "Not a difficult fix with the right parts. Are you headed somewhere important? I could give you a lift while your car gets towed." Emma hesitated. "Under," Normal circumstances, she would politely decline. She'd spent years relying solely on herself, wary of help that came with invisible strings attached. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Lily's conference mattered. "Actually, I have a parent-teacher conference in 30 minutes across town," she admitted. "If you could just point me toward the nearest bus stop, I can drive you," Daniel offered, his expression sincere. "Really, it's no trouble." Emma studied him, weighing her options. There was something in his eyes, a genuine kindness perhaps, or a loneliness she recognized from her own mirror, that made her decision. "All right," she agreed, reaching back into her car for her purse and Lily's forgotten science project. "But I'll need to arrange a tow first." As she made the call to her usual mechanic, Dan took a business card from his wallet and wrote something on the back. "Give this to the tow driver," he said when she finished the call. "It's the address of a garage I trust. Tell them to bill me." Emma immediately stiffened. "That's very kind, but I can handle my own repairs." Daniel held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "No offense intended. Jim's just a friend who does good work at fair prices. The card is just an introduction." The tension in Emma's shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you, I appreciate that." As they settled into his car, the luxury of the leather seats making Emma acutely aware of her second-hand clothes, an awkward silence fell. Daniel seemed content to let it linger, focusing on navigating the afternoon traffic with quiet concentration. "So," Emma finally said, "you restore classic cars?" Daniel's smile revealed a dimple in his right cheek. "Used to. Back in college, I worked at an auto shop to help pay tuition, developed a bit of an obsession with bringing old engines back to life." He glanced at her. "These days, it's more of a weekend hobby when I can find the time." "Which is rarely, I'm guessing," Emma said, recognizing the familiar tone of someone whose work had gradually consumed other passions. "Too rarely," he agreed, looking surprised at her perception. "What about you? What do you do when you're not rushing to parent-teacher conferences?" Emma laughed softly. "Work, mostly. I manage a bookstore during the day and waitress some evenings. When I'm very lucky, I get to read actual books rather than just sell them." She immediately wondered why she'd been so forthcoming. Something about his attentive silence invited confidences she usually guarded closely. "What subject does your child take?" he asked, skillfully changing the subject as if sensing her discomfort. "Science! My daughter Lily is 15, sophomore year. This meeting is about her advanced placement options for next year." Pride crept into Emma's voice, despite her attempt at casualness. "She's thinking pre-med for college." "Impressive," Daniel said, and seemed to genuinely mean it. "You must be very proud." "I am," Emma acknowledged. "She works incredibly hard. Like her mother, I'm guessing," Daniel observed quietly. Emma glanced at him, startled by the perceptiveness. Before she could respond, they had arrived at Meadowbrook High. School, its brick edifice a familiar landmark in her daily routines. "Thank you for the ride," she said, gathering her things. "And the mechanic recommendation." "My pleasure," Daniel replied. Then, surprising both of them, he added, "Would it be too forward to offer to wait and drive you home afterward? Public transportation can be unpredictable." Emma paused, her hand on the door handle. Common sense told her to politely decline, but then she thought of the long walk to the bus stop, the evening shift starting in just a few hours, and Lily's drama club meeting with the cupcakes still in her broken-down car. "Actually," she said, making a split-second decision, "if you're serious, that would be incredibly helpful." Daniel's smile, genuine and warm, transformed his serious face. "I'll be right here," he promised. As Emma walked toward the school entrance, she couldn't help but wonder at the strange turn her day had taken. In the carefully compartmentalized map of her life, where exactly did one place an unexpected encounter with a kind stranger in an expensive car who fixed radiator hoses in his designer suit? The parent-teacher conference went better than Emma had anticipated. Ms. Rivera, Lily's science teacher, spoke glowingly about her daughter's aptitude for biology and chemistry, confirming what Emma already knew. Lily was exceptional. Despite the pride swelling in her chest, Emma couldn't help but feel a familiar knot of anxiety forming as they discussed advanced placement courses and future college prospects. These AP courses would give Lily a significant advantage when applying to pre-med programs, Ms. Rivera explained, sliding a brochure across the desk. But there are additional fees for the materials and exams. Of course there were. Emma kept her smile firmly in place as she scanned the figures. Another expense to somehow accommodate in their stretched budget. I'd also recommend the summer research program at Westlake University, Ms. Rivera continued enthusiastically. Several of my former students received scholarships after participating. That sounds wonderful, Emma replied, carefully folding the brochure and tucking it into her purse. We'll definitely consider it. As the meeting concluded, Emma found herself mentally calculating which bills could be delayed another month. The heating bill was already past due, but winter was fast approaching. Perhaps the credit card payment could wait. The interest would be crushing, but Lily's future couldn't. Outside the classroom, Emma leaned against the wall for a moment, taking a deep breath. She wouldn't let financial constraints limit her daughter's potential. She just needed to work harder, sleep less, stretch every dollar further. "Mom, you made it!" Lily's voice broke through her thoughts as her daughter bounded down the hallway, ponytails winging. At 15, Lily had Emma's hazel eyes and determined chin, but her optimism remained untarnished by life's hardships. "Of course, I did," Emma smiled, pushing her worries aside. "I wouldn't miss it. Ms. Rivera thinks you're brilliant, by the way." Lily rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her pleased smile. "Did she talk to you about the AP classes and the summer program?" "She did," Emma confirmed, slinging an arm around her daughter's shoulders as they walked toward the exit. "We'll figure it out." "Figure what out?" Lily asked, immediately perceptive. "Nothing important," Emma deflected. "Now don't you have drama club? I've got the cupcakes in the car." She stopped abruptly, remembering her car was currently being towed across town. "Actually, there's been a slight change of plans. My car broke down, but I've got a ride. We'll need to pick up the cupcakes from the mechanics." Lily's eyes widened with concern. "Broke down? Again? Mom, how much is that going to—" "Don't worry about it," Emma interjected gently but firmly. "We're handling it. Now, about that ride." As they pushed through the school's double doors, Emma spotted Daniel immediately. He stood beside his Tesla, apparently deep in conversation on his phone. Even from a distance, the tension in his posture was evident. "Not interested in rescheduling again, Martin," he was saying as they approached, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been present during their earlier interaction. "The partnership agreement was clear. Either they meet our sustainability requirements, or we walk." He glanced up, noticing Emma and Lily, and his demeanor immediately softened. "I need to go. Have the revised proposal on my desk by morning." He ended the call and smiled apologetically. "Sorry about that. We should be the ones apologizing for keeping you waiting," Emma replied, suddenly aware of how much time he'd already devoted to helping a stranger. "This is my daughter Lily. Lily, this is Daniel. He kindly offered us a ride after the car decided to quit on me." "Nice to meet you," Lily said, her curious gaze taking in Daniel's expensive watch and car before landing back on his face with teenage directness. "Thanks for helping my mom." "The pleasure's mine," Daniel replied, and Emma was struck again by his sincerity. There was no condescension in his tone, no sense that he viewed his assistance as charity. "We need to make a quick stop at Valleyside. A diner before drama club," Emma explained as they settled into the car. "I left some cupcakes there for the meeting." Daniel nodded, pulling smoothly into traffic. "Valleyside. Is that the place on Elm with the incredible apple pie?" "That's the one," Emma confirmed, surprised. "You've been there. It's one of the few places in town where I can eat without being interrupted," Daniel said cryptically. "Anonymous booths in the back, and waitstaff who don't hover." Emma made a mental note of this peculiar preference as they drove. Was he avoiding someone? A messy divorce, perhaps? She immediately chided herself for speculating. His reasons were none of her business. At the diner, Emma rushed inside, returning moments later with a pink bakery box. "Cupcakes acquired," she announced, sliding back into the passenger seat. "Now to drama club if you don't mind. It's back at the school." "No problem," Daniel replied, pulling back onto the road. "So, Lily, your mum mentioned you're interested in medicine." Lily leaned forward between the seats, suddenly animated. "Neurosurgery specifically. I'm fascinated by the brain's plasticity and regenerative potential. There's groundbreaking research happening with neural stem cells that could revolutionize treatment for degenerative conditions." Emma watched as Daniel's expression changed from polite interest to genuine engagement. "You're talking about Dr. Reeves's work at Stanford?" "Yes." Lily's eyes widened. "You're familiar with it?" "My company partners with several university research departments," Daniel explained. "Neuroscience isn't my field, but I try to stay informed on breakthrough technologies across disciplines." "Your company?" Lily asked. Curiosity piqued. A flicker of something hesitation crossed Daniel's face before he answered. "Harrison Innovations. We develop sustainable energy solutions." Emma nearly choked on air. Harrison Innovations was one of the largest employers in the region. Their sleek headquarters downtown, a landmark of modern architecture. The name had seemed vaguely familiar when he'd introduced himself, but she hadn't made the connection. "You're Daniel Harrison?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. He glanced at her briefly, his expression guarded. "Guilty as charged." The car fell silent as Emma processed this revelation. She'd been getting a ride from one of the wealthiest men in the state, perhaps the country, and had been treating him like a friendly stranger who happened to know about car repairs. Lily, however, was undeterred. "I read about your transparent solar panels in Science Monthly, the integration of photovoltaic cells into regular window glass was brilliant." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly at her technical interest rather than his status. "That was one of our more challenging projects. 5 years of development before we got the transparency to efficiency ratio right." They arrived back at the school, where a group of teenagers was already gathering outside the auditorium. Emma turned to Daniel, feeling suddenly awkward. "Thank you again for all your help. We've taken up far too much of your time." "It was no trouble," he assured her. "Honestly, it's been—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Refreshing." Lily, ever practical, asked, "Mom, how are we getting home later?" Before Emma could respond with her hastily formulated bus plan, Daniel spoke. "I can come back if you'd like. What time does the meeting end?" "That's really not necessary," Emma began. 6 o'clock, Lily supplied helpfully, ignoring her mother's pointed look. "And Mom has to work at the diner right after." Daniel checked his watch. "I have a dinner meeting at 7. I could drop you both off on my way." Emma felt cornered by kindness, an unusual predicament. "I couldn't impose further—" "It's not an imposition," Daniel interrupted gently. "It would actually help me avoid being too early for my meeting." The practicality of his offer warred with Emma's pride. Finally, utility won out. "Thank you. That would be very helpful." As Lily hurried off to join her friends, Emma lingered by the car, feeling compelled to address the elephant in the room. "I had no idea who you were earlier. I hope I didn't say anything." "You treated me like a normal person," Daniel cut in, his tone warm. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" There was a vulnerability in his question that caught Emma off guard. Before she could respond, Daniel continued. 6 o'clock then, he said, his professional composure returning. "I'll be here." As Emma watched him drive away, she was struck by the strange intersection of their vastly different worlds. The practical part of her, the part that had survived divorce, financial hardship, and single parenthood, warned her to keep her distance. Nothing complicated a life more thoroughly than unexpected connections. Yet as she turned toward the school entrance, Emma couldn't help but feel that something significant had shifted in her carefully ordered universe. Like a small stone that alters the course of a stream, her chance encounter with Daniel Harrison seemed to be redirecting currents she hadn't known were flowing. "Mom!" Lily called from the doorway. "Are you coming? Miss Bradshaw is asking about the cupcakes." "Coming!" Emma replied, pushing away her thoughts. There would be time for reflection later. Right now, there were teenagers to feed, a shift to work, and bills to somehow pay, the familiar rhythm of her life continuing despite the day's unexpected detour. The evening shift at Valleyside Diner began like any other for Emma, tying on, her faded blue apron, filling salt shakers, checking the specials board. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the afternoon's strange encounter. Daniel Harrison had dropped them off promptly at 6 as promised, insisting on driving directly to the diner despite Emma's protests that she could walk the 3 blocks. "Thanks again for the ride," she'd said awkwardly as she'd climbed out of his luxury car, acutely aware of her waitress uniform and the stark contrast between them. "It was my pleasure," he'd replied, and something in his tone had suggested he genuinely meant it. "I hope your car troubles are resolved quickly." Now 2 hours into her shift, Emma balanced plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes as she wove between tables. The Friday evening rush was in full swing, the diner packed with families and teenagers fueling up before football games or movie nights. Normal. People living normal lives that didn't involve chance meetings with billionaires. "Table 7's getting impatient for their check," Marge warned, as Emma passed the counter. "On it," Emma replied, mentally adding it to her growing list of tasks. As she approached Table 7 with their bill, the bell above the door chimed. Out of habit, she glanced up and nearly dropped her order pad. Daniel Harrison stood in the entrance, scanning the diner. He'd changed from his business suit into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. Several diners were already giving him curious looks, as if trying to place where they knew him from. Before Emma could process his unexpected appearance, Marge nudged her. "Isn't that the guy from the papers? Solar panel billionaire," she whispered. "What's he doing in our diner?" "I have no idea," Emma murmured, though the truth flickered uncomfortably in her chest. Surely he hadn't come because of her. Daniel spotted her then, and a brief smile crossed his face before he made his way to an empty booth in the back corner. Emma finished with Table 7, then approached him with professional composure she didn't entirely feel. "Welcome to Valleyside," she said, handing him a menu. "Our special tonight is meatloaf with garlic mashed potatoes." Daniel accepted the menu, but didn't open it. "Hello again, Emma. I hope you don't mind my showing up here. My dinner meeting ended early, and I remembered you mentioning the apple pie." It was such a normal explanation that Emma found herself relaxing slightly. "The pie is definitely worth a special trip," she agreed, slipping into her waitress persona. "Can I get you something to drink while you decide?" "Just coffee. Black. And I'll take a slice of that famous pie." He glanced around the busy diner. "You have your hands full tonight." "Friday rush," Emma explained, already stepping back. "I'll get your coffee right away." For the next hour, Emma continued her usual rhythm, taking orders, delivering food, refilling drinks. She was acutely aware of Daniel in the corner booth, nursing his coffee and watching the diner's activities with quiet interest. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and he would offer a small smile before returning to what appeared to be work emails on his phone. "Your billionaire friend's been here an awful long time for just coffee and pie," Marge observed, as Emma picked up an order of cheeseburgers and fries. "And he keeps looking at you." "He's not my friend," Emma corrected, feeling her cheeks warm. "He helped me with my car trouble today. That's all." Marge raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. As the rush finally began to subside around 9 o'clock, Emma found herself with a moment to breathe. She approached Daniel's booth, where he sat with an empty pie plate and his third cup of coffee. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, clearing his plate. Daniel looked up from his phone. Actually, I was wondering what time you finished tonight. I spoke with Jim at the garage about your car. Emma stiffened. You didn't need to do that. I didn't mean to overstep, he said quickly, picking up on her tone. Jim's an old friend. I just asked for an update when I called him about another matter. The tension in Emma's shoulders eased slightly. I'm sorry, I'm not used to... She paused, searching for the right words. Having someone check on your car, Daniel supplied with a hint of a smile. Having someone help, she admitted. I finish. At 11, Daniel nodded. Jim said the parts for your radiator won't arrive until Monday. I'd be happy to drive you home tonight, and perhaps we could figure out a temporary transportation solution for the weekend. Emma's pride immediately bristled at the offer. That's very kind, but we'll manage. Lily's father is in town this weekend, so she'll be with him. The lie slipped out before she could stop it. In reality, Lily's father had moved to California 5 years ago and rarely made appearances in their lives beyond the occasional phone call. If Daniel sensed the untruth, he didn't show it. Of course. Well, the offer stands if you need it. Thank you, Emma said, grateful for his tact. I should get back to my tables. As she walked away, Emma mentally chastised herself for the unnecessary lie. Why had she felt the need to invent a present ex-husband? Was it to create distance, to erect a barrier between herself and this man whose kindness felt both welcome and threatening to her carefully constructed independence? The remainder of her shift passed quickly, and by 11, Emma's feet were aching as she counted her tips and hung up her apron. To her surprise, Daniel was still there, now chatting amiably with Marge about the diner's history. Been here since '82, Marge was saying proudly. Same countertops, same booth vinyl, though we've had to patch it a few times, as you can see. That kind of consistency is rare these days, Daniel replied, and Emma could tell he genuinely meant it. Too many businesses lose their character in pursuit of modernization. Exactly, Marge beamed, clearly charmed. She noticed Emma approaching and winked. Your friend here has been keeping me company. Says he's giving you a ride home since your car's in the shop. Emma opened her mouth to protest, but found herself too tired to argue. The thought of waiting for the late bus, which would still leave her with a 6-block walk home, suddenly seemed exhausting. If the offer still stands, she said to Daniel, I would appreciate that ride. Outside, the October night had turned chilly, and Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. Daniel's Tesla was parked directly in front of the diner, its sleek lines gleaming under the streetlights. Thank you for waiting, Emma said as they settled into the heated leather seats. You really didn't have to. I wanted to, Daniel replied simply, pulling onto the empty street. Which way? Emma directed him toward the east side of town, where the neat middle-class homes gradually gave way to apartment complexes and older neighborhoods. She was acutely aware of the growing disparity between his car and their surroundings as they turned onto her street. The blue building on the left, she indicated, pointing to a 3-story apartment complex that had seen better days. The small front garden was well tended, Emma's ongoing battle against urban decay, but the building itself needed paint and repairs the landlord consistently postponed. Daniel pulled to a stop, but made no move to unlock the doors. Instead, he turned slightly in his seat to face her. Emma, I hope you don't mind my asking, but do you work 7 days a week? The question caught her off guard. Not usually. I have Sundays off from both jobs, and sometimes Tuesday evenings. If the diner's slow, he nodded thoughtfully. The reason I ask is that I have a proposition for you. Emma immediately tensed, her mind racing to conclusions. Daniel seemed to read her expression and quickly added, a professional one. I'm hosting a fundraising dinner for the Children's Hospital next weekend. My usual event coordinator had a family emergency and had to fly to Arizona yesterday. I need someone organized, efficient, and good with people to help finalize the details and oversee the event. And you're asking me? Emma couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. I've spent the evening watching you juggle a dozen tables without missing a beat. Remember every customer's preferences and maintain a genuine smile despite being on your feet for hours, Daniel said. Those are exactly the skills needed for this job. It pays $5,000 for the week's work, plus a bonus if the fundraiser exceeds its goals. $5,000. Emma's mind reeled at the figure, enough to cover Lily's AP courses, with plenty left for bills, and maybe even a start on the college fund that existed more as a concept than an actual savings account. I don't have experience planning charity. Events, she said hesitantly. You have experience managing chaos and making people feel valued, Daniel countered. The technical details can be learned. I need someone I can trust to get things done. Trust. The word hung between them. You barely know me, Emma pointed out. Daniel's expression turned serious. I'm a good judge of character. It's how I've built my company. Besides, you changed a stranger's tire without hesitation and have been raising a brilliant daughter on your own. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and capabilities. Emma looked down at her hands, calloused from work and household repairs. A part of her wanted to accept immediately the practical part that knew what such money would mean for Lily's future. But another part hesitated, wary of stepping into Daniel's world, of creating complications in her carefully managed life. Could I think about it overnight? She finally asked. Of course, Daniel replied, pulling a business card from his wallet. My personal number is on the back. The position needs to be filled by Monday, so I'd need your decision by tomorrow evening. Emma took the card, its heavy stock paper and embossed lettering, another reminder of the different worlds they inhabited. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised. I look forward to it, Daniel said, unlocking the doors. Good night, Emma. Good night, Daniel. And thank you again. Inside her apartment, Emma leaned against the closed door, the business card still clutched in her hand. The space was small but meticulously organized, every inch utilized with the efficiency that came from years of making do with less. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with second-hand treasures and library discards that had created Lily's love of learning. A worn but clean sofa faced a small television, beside it a basket of mending that never seemed to empty. Lily appeared in the hallway, her hair wet from a shower, wearing flannel pajamas that were already too short at the ankles. Mom, I thought I heard you come in. Hey, sweetheart, Emma smiled, slipping the business card into her pocket. Why are you still up? It's nearly midnight. I was finishing some research for the biology project, Lily explained, following Emma into their tiny kitchen. Who drove you home? I saw headlights, but it didn't sound like Mrs. Abernathy's car. Mrs. Abernathy was their elderly neighbor who occasionally gave Emma rides when their schedules aligned. It was Daniel, actually, Emma admitted, putting on the kettle for tea. My car won't be ready until Monday. Lily's eyebrows shot up. Daniel Harrison, the billionaire solar panel guy? He's just a person, Lily, Emma said, though she wasn't entirely convinced of that herself. A person who happened to be at the diner and offered a ride. A person who owns half the commercial real estate downtown and has patents on technology that's literally changing how the world uses energy. Lily corrected, accepting the mug of chamomile tea Emma handed her. What did you talk about? Emma hesitated, unsure whether to mention the job offer. Just everyday things, she said vaguely. How was your evening? Did you make good progress on your project? Lily allowed the subject change, launching into an enthusiastic explanation of her research on neural regeneration in reptiles. Emma listened attentively, asking questions in the right places, all the while feeling the weight of the business card in her pocket and the decision that awaited her. Later, after Lily had finally gone to bed, Emma sat at their small kitchen table. With her calculator, bills spread before her. The car repair would set them back at least $300. Money she'd been saving for winter clothes and the deposit on Lily's advanced placement courses. The rent was due next week, and the electricity bill had a red final notice stamp that couldn't be ignored much longer. She pulled Daniel's card from her pocket and traced the embossed letters of Harrison Innovations. $5,000 would solve these immediate problems and give them breathing room they hadn't had in years. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that accepting would somehow shift the foundation of her carefully independent life. Across town, in his spacious penthouse overlooking the city lights, Daniel Harrison found himself equally preoccupied. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, bourbon in hand, wondering what had possessed him to offer a job to a woman he'd just met. It wasn't like him to make impulsive decisions, especially not about business matters. "You're officially losing it, Harrison," he muttered to himself, taking a sip of the amber liquid. His phone chimed with an email notification, the 15th in the past hour. The Tokyo investors were getting nervous about the sustainability metrics for the new solar project. His R&D team needed approval for additional testing. His sister had sent 3 more messages about Thanksgiving, the latest including a guilt-inducing photo of her children with a handmade "We miss Uncle Dan" sign. Daniel swiped away the notifications and instead found himself scrolling to a number he'd added earlier, Emma Matthews. His finger hovered over it before he locked the screen and set the phone down on his sleek marble countertop. There was something about Emma that had caught his attention beyond her obvious competence or the warm way she interacted with her daughter. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she carried herself, the complete lack of pretense or artifice in her manner. In his world of carefully calculated interactions and relationships colored by his wealth, such authenticity was rare and refreshing. "It's just a business arrangement," he told himself firmly. "She needs the money, and you need someone reliable for the fundraiser." But even as he tried to frame it in purely professional terms, Daniel knew there was more to his interest. For the first time in years, he'd felt a genuine connection with someone who saw him, not his wealth or his company, but him. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, surrounded by luxury and technology, yet somehow disconnected from the human experiences that gave life meaning. Meanwhile, Emma Matthews managed to create warmth and genuine connection despite working 2 jobs and struggling financially. Daniel found himself hoping she would accept the position, not just because he needed her organizational skills for the fundraiser, but because he wanted another chance to understand how she did it, how she maintained such grace under pressure, how she'd raised a daughter like Lily while facing challenges that would break many people. As the city's lights twinkled below him, Daniel made a decision. If Emma agreed to take the job, he would make sure the fundraiser was a success, not just for the children's hospital, but for her as well. He had resources and connections that could open doors for Lily's academic future, opportunities that talent and hard work alone sometimes couldn't access in a system stacked against those without financial advantages. It wasn't charity, he told himself. It was recognizing potential and removing arbitrary barriers, the same principle that had guided his business from the beginning. With that rationalization comforting him, Daniel finally turned from the window and headed to bed, leaving his ever-present phone and its demands behind for the first time in months. Saturday morning dawned with a clarity that only autumn could bring, the sunrise painting Meadowbrook in shades of amber and gold. Emma woke before her alarm, her mind already churning with the decision that awaited her. Daniel's business card sat on her nightstand where she'd placed it the night before, after hours of deliberation. In the kitchen, she quietly prepared coffee, savoring the rare stillness before Lily woke. Weekend mornings were precious. One of the few times when Emma allowed herself to slow down, to breathe, to simply exist without the constant pressure of schedules and obligations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marge. "Jim called the diner looking for you. Says your car needs more work than expected. Possible head gasket issue. Call him." Emma closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. A head gasket repair would cost far more than she had budgeted, possibly more than the car was worth at this point. The universe seemed to be conspiring to push her toward accepting Daniel's offer. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone rang. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Emma, it's Daniel Harrison." His voice was clear, professional. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," she replied, glancing at the clock. 7:15, early by weekend standards, but practically mid-morning in her usual routine. "I was just having coffee. I spoke with Jim about your car," Daniel said, getting straight to the point. "He mentioned there might be additional issues." "Beyond the radiator hose," Emma sighed. "Yes, I just heard. A head gasket, apparently." "I thought that might be the case," Daniel replied, and Emma could hear what sounded like traffic in the background. "Listen, I'm actually nearby. I was wondering if you and Lily might be available for breakfast. There's something I'd like to discuss regarding the fundraiser position, and I'd value Lily's input as well." The request caught Emma off guard. "Breakfast? Today? The Sunrise Cafe in about 20 minutes? My treat, of course." Emma hesitated. Involving Lily in this decision felt both appropriate and concerning. Her daughter was mature for her age and had always been Emma's partner in navigating life's challenges. But she also didn't want Lily to feel the weight of their financial concerns more than she already did. "All right," she finally agreed. "We'll be there." After waking a groggy but curious Lily and explaining the invitation, they quickly dressed and walked the 6 blocks to the Sunrise Cafe, a popular weekend spot known for its enormous pancakes and locally sourced ingredients. To Emma's surprise, Daniel was already waiting outside, dressed casually in jeans and a forest green sweater that made his eyes appear more pronounced. He looked different in daylight, more approachable, less like the imposing CEO from newspaper. "Photos, good morning," he greeted them with a genuine smile. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Inside, they were led to a corner booth, somewhat secluded from the bustling main area. Emma noticed how the hostess treated Daniel with a mixture of deference and curiosity, clearly recognizing him but trying to be discreet. "So," Daniel began after they'd ordered, "whole grain pancakes and fruit for him, Belgian waffles for Lily, and a simple omelette for Emma," who was acutely aware of the price differences on the menu, despite his insistence that breakfast washes treat. "I'm sure you're wondering why I wanted to meet like this. You mentioned the fundraiser position," Emma prompted, adding a single packet of sugar to her coffee instead of her usual 2, a small economy that had become habit. "Yes," Daniel said, his expression turning more businesslike. "After our conversation last night, I realized I hadn't properly explained the role, or why I think you're right for it." He glanced at Lily. "And since this would impact your routine as well, I thought you should be part of the discussion." Lily looked surprised at being included, but sat up straighter. "What exactly would my mom be doing for you?" Daniel seemed to appreciate her directness. "The Harrison Foundation hosts an annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. It's our biggest charitable event of the year. 300 guests, silent auction, live entertainment. The coordinator handles everything from confirming vendor, details to managing staff to solving last-minute crises." "And your usual person can't do it?" Lily asked. "Family emergency," Daniel explained. "She's a single parent too, actually. Her mother fell and broke her hip in Arizona." Emma was touched that he'd remembered this detail about his employee. "The event is next Saturday," Daniel continued, "so most of the major arrangements are already in place. What I need is someone, detail-oriented and unflappable, to make sure everything comes together smoothly. And you think that's my mom?" Lily's tone held a mixture of pride and protectiveness that made Emma's heart swell. Daniel's gaze shifted to Emma, his expression sincere. "I do. I watched her manage a busy dinner rush last night with grace and efficiency. Those are exactly the skills needed for this role." Their breakfast arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they began eating, Emma tried to ignore the way Daniel's obvious wealth contrasted with their situation. His watch alone probably cost more than their rent for a year. Yet here he was, eating pancakes and discussing work as if they were equals. The position would be Monday through Saturday, Daniel explained, returning to business. The hours would be flexible until Friday, when we'd need you at the venue most of the day for setup, and then all day Saturday for the event itself. What about her bookstore job? Lily asked practically. I've already spoken with Gerald, Emma admitted, surprising herself. She'd called her boss early that morning, tentatively explaining the potential opportunity and asking about a week's unpaid leave. Gerald, always supportive, had immediately agreed. He can cover the store with part-time help next week. And the diner? Daniel inquired. Marge owes me for covering shifts, Emma said, though in truth she wasn't sure how Marge would react to her sudden unavailability. I think I can arrange it. Lily was watching the exchange with clever eyes, clearly processing implications beyond the immediate logistics. So this would be what, a one-time consulting job? For now, yes, Daniel said, his tone careful, but the foundation hosts several events throughout the year. If things gowl, he left the possibility hanging. Emma understood what wasn't being said. This could be more than a temporary solution to their financial crunch. It could be an opportunity for something sustainable, something that might ease the constant struggle. May I ask a personal question? Lily said suddenly, her expression serious. Daniel looked surprised but nodded. Of course. Why, my mom, Meadowbrook, is full of professional event planners. Why choose a bookstore manager and waitress you just met yesterday? Emma nearly choked on her coffee. Lily! It's a fair question, Daniel said, not looking offended. He considered for a moment before answering. Do you know much about how I built my company, Lily? She shook her head. I look for potential where others don't think to look, he said simply. When I started Harrison Innovations, the conventional wisdom was that solar energy couldn't compete with fossil fuels without massive government subsidies. Everyone focused on making marginally better versions of existing technology. His passion was evident as he continued. Instead, we completely reimagined what solar collection could be. We found brilliant engineers, not from MIT or Stanford, but from community colleges and state universities, people with talent and drive, who just needed an opportunity. He turned his attention back to Emma. Yesterday, I watched you handle multiple competing demands with efficiency and grace. You remembered every customer's preferences, anticipated needs before they were voiced, and maintained a positive attitude despite what I'm guessing was an exhausting day. Those skills are surprisingly rare, and they're exactly what this position requires. The sincerity in his voice made Emma's usual defenses waver. She'd spent so many years being underestimated, her capabilities reduced to the job she held rather than the person she was. I should also mention, Daniel added, that the position comes with transportation. We provide a car for your use during the week, which would solve your immediate problem until your own vehicle is repaired. That practical consideration tipped the scales. Emma took a deep breath and made her decision. I appreciate your confidence. In me, she said. I'd like to accept the position. Daniel's smile was immediate and genuine. Excellent. If you're free tomorrow, I can show you the venue and introduce you to the team you'll be working with. Tomorrow works, Emma agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation at this sudden change in their circumstances. As they finished breakfast, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Emma was surprised to discover that beneath Daniel's business exterior was a man with a dry sense of humor and a genuine interest in others. He asked Lily thoughtful questions about her science project, listening intently to her explanations of neural regeneration with none of the condescension adults often showed teenagers. After Daniel paid the bill, refusing Emma's attempt to contribute, they stepped outside into the crisp autumn morning. "I took the liberty of arranging something," he said, gesturing to a sleek silver SUV parked nearby. "The foundation keeps several vehicles for staff use. This one is yours for the week." Emma stared at the luxury vehicle, its showroom shine reflecting the morning sun. "That's extremely generous, but it's a practical solution," Daniel interrupted gently. "You'll need reliable transportation for the week, especially as you'll be traveling between vendor locations. Consider it part of the job equipment." Before Emma could formulate a response that balanced gratitude with her instinctive resistance to accepting such help, Lily spoke up. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. My mom was worried about how we'd manage without her car." Her straightforward acknowledgement cut through Emma's complicated feelings, reminding her that practical solutions were what mattered most, not pride. "You're welcome. Lily, and please call me Daniel." He handed Emma a set of keys. "The insurance and registration are in the glove compartment. My assistant will email you a detailed schedule for the week, but plan on meeting me at the Grand Meridian Hotel tomorrow at 10. As they said their goodbyes, Emma felt as though she was standing at a crossroads. For years, her life had followed a predictable if challenging path: work, motherhood, financial struggles, rinse and repeat. Now, in less than 24 hours, an unexpected encounter had opened a door to something entirely different. "Mom, this is huge!" Lily exclaimed once Daniel had driven away. $5,000 for 1 week's work. "It's a lot of responsibility," Emma cautioned, though she couldn't suppress her own excitement. "And it's just temporary." "But if you do well," he said, "there could be more events," Lily persisted, her practical mind already calculating possibilities. "And even if it's just this once, it solves our immediate problems. We can fix the car, pay the bills, and I can register for those AP courses Ms. Rivera recommended." The simple joy in her daughter's face made Emma's decision feel right, despite her lingering reservations. For years, she taught Lily to be self-reliant, to work hard and expect no handouts. But perhaps she'd also inadvertently taught her to refuse opportunity when it appeared in unexpected forms. "Let's take it one day at a time," Emma said, unlocking the SUV with a press of a button, a small luxury she wasn't accustomed to. "First, I need to call Marge and arrange my schedule for next week." The interior of the vehicle smelled of new leather and contained more technology than Emma had encountered in years. The dashboard resembled something from a spaceship, with a touchscreen display and buttons whose functions she could only guess at. "This is incredible," Lily breathed, running her hand over the soft leather seat. "Do you think it has seat warmers?" "Probably," Emma laughed, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "Let's figure out how to start it first." After some trial and error, the engine purred to life. The smooth, quiet power of the vehicle was a stark contrast to Harold Honda's rattling protest each morning. Emma carefully adjusted the mirrors and seat, trying to feel at home in this borrowed luxury. "Where to first?" Lily asked, already fiddling. "With the climate controls. The diner," Emma decided. "I need to talk to Marge in person about next week." As they drove across town, Emma couldn't help noticing how differently people regarded the sleek SUV compared to her aging Honda. Other drivers yielded more readily at intersections, pedestrians cast appreciative glances, and even the flow of traffic seemed to part more easily for them. "Is this how the other half lives?" she mused aloud. "Half?" Lily snorted. "Try like the top 1%. Daniel Harrison isn't just wealthy, Mom, he's next-level rich. Which makes me wonder even more why he's entrusting his foundation's biggest event to someone with zero experience in event planning," Emma said, voicing the doubt that had been nagging at her. Lily considered this. Maybe he meant what he said, about seeing potential where others don't look, or maybe he just trusts his instincts about people. "Maybe," Emma agreed, though she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Daniel's interest than professional opportunity. At the diner, Marge's eyebrows shot up when she saw Emma and Lily arrive in the luxury SUV. Well, she drawled, wiping her hands on her apron as Emma approached the counter. Moving up in the world already? Emma explained the situation. The temporary job, the loaned vehicle, her need for schedule flexibility next week. To her surprise, Marge seemed genuinely pleased for her. "About time something good came your way," the older woman said, refilling coffee cups for the customers at the counter. "Don't worry about next week. The college kids are always looking for extra shifts." "Are you sure?" Emma pressed. "I don't want to leave you short-handed." "Emma Matthews," Marge said sternly, "in 7 years, you've never once called in sick, never missed a shift, never complained about staying late. You've earned this opportunity. Take it with both hands." Touched by her boss's support, Emma impulsively hugged the surprised woman. "Thank you, Marge. Now get out of here and enjoy your weekend for once," Marge ordered, though her gruff tone was belied by the warmth in her eyes. "You've got fancy billionaire business to prepare for." As Emma and Lily left the diner, a strange lightness filled Emma's chest. For years, every aspect of her life had been constrained by necessity. Where they lived, what they ate, how they spent their time, every decision filtered through the lens of financial survival. Now, for the first time in longer than she could remember, possibility stretched before her. The feeling was almost dizzying, like suddenly stepping into a room with no walls after years of confinement. "What should we do with our Saturday?" Lily asked as they returned to the SUV. "We have a car, no immediate crisis, and actual free time." Emma's first instinct was to suggest practical tasks: grocery shopping, laundry, the mending pile that never seemed to diminish. But looking at her daughter's expectant face, she made a different choice. "Let's drive to Lake Willow," she suggested impulsively. "We haven't been to the nature preserve since your school field trip in 5th grade. Lily's face lit up. "Really? But it's an hour away." "We have reliable transportation," Emma smiled, gesturing to the luxury vehicle. "And for once, we have time." As they drove toward the nature preserve, the suburban landscape gradually giving way to rolling hills and autumn-painted forests, Emma allowed herself to hope. Not just for financial relief, though that was certainly welcome, but for something more elusive. A chance to expand their horizons, to step beyond the boundaries that circumstance had drawn around their lives. Whatever came from this unexpected detour with Daniel Harrison and his foundation, she was determined to make the most of it, for Lily, for their future, and perhaps even for herself. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only mid-autumn could deliver. Emma stood before the ornate entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel, the loaned SUV safely parked in the underground garage. She dressed carefully, in her best black pants and a forest green blouse that Lily had insisted brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a neat twist rather than her usual practical ponytail. "You can do this," she murmured to herself, straightening her shoulders before pushing through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. The Grand Meridian was Meadowbrook's finest hotel, a renovated historic building with crystal chandeliers, gilded mirrors, and an atmosphere of old-world elegance. Emma had passed it countless times, but had never had reason to enter. Now she moved through the space with deliberate confidence, refusing to be intimidated by its grandeur. "Ms. Matthews?" A young woman in a tailored charcoal suit approached, tablet in hand. "I'm Vivian Chen, Mr. Harrison's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in the Monarch Ballroom." "Thank you," Emma replied, following Vivian through a corridor lined with black and white photographs, documenting the hotel's century-long history. The Monarch Ballroom took Emma's breath away. Soaring ceilings with intricate plasterwork, floor to ceiling. Windows draped in midnight blue velvet, and a parquet floor that gleamed with meticulous care. A dozen round tables were already arranged throughout the space, each large enough to seat 10 guests. Daniel stood near the center of the room, deep in conversation with an older man who appeared to be the hotel manager. He wore a tailored grey suit that somehow managed to look both authoritative and approachable. When he spotted Emma, his face brightened with a genuine smile. "Emma, perfect timing," he called, gesturing her over. Howard was just walking me through the updated floor plan. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of introductions and information. Emma met the catering manager, the florist, the audiovisual team, and a dozen other vendors, essential to the event's success. She took careful notes on her newly purchased notebook, asking clarifying questions and memorizing names with the same attention to detail she applied at the diner. "You're a natural at this," Daniel observed, as they reviewed the silent auction arrangements. "Most people would be overwhelmed by now." "I'm definitely processing a lot," Emma admitted. "But it's not so different from managing multiple orders and customer needs at the diner. Just fancier." Daniel laughed, a warm sound that seemed to surprise even him. "That's a refreshing perspective. Speaking of which, would you like to break for lunch? There's a cafe in the hotel that makes an excellent niçoise salad." The cafe, like everything else at the Grand Meridian, exuded understated luxury. As they settled at a corner table with views of the hotel's manicured gardens, Emma found herself relaxing slightly. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, Daniel had a way of making her feel included rather than out of place. "So," he said, after their orders had been taken, "what do you think of the event so far?" "It's impressively organized," Emma replied honestly. "Though I'm curious about something. The fundraiser is for the Children's Hospital, but I haven't seen any plans to include actual children or families who've benefited from the hospital services." Daniel looked surprised, then thoughtful. "You're right. We've always focused on the donors and sponsors. It's been about recognizing their contributions rather than connecting them directly with the impact." "Maybe there's room for both," Emma suggested. "Perhaps a short video featuring some of the children who've been helped, or even having a few families attend to speak briefly about their experiences." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a spark of genuine interest. "That's an excellent idea. It would give the evening more meaning beyond just another charity gala." He studied her with new appreciation. "You see things differently. That's valuable." Their lunch arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Emma noticed how Daniel kept checking his phone, his brow furrowing slightly each time. "Is everything all right?" she asked after his third glance at the screen. Just some unexpected developments with the Tokyo investors," he replied, setting the phone face down on the table with a deliberate motion. "Nothing that can't wait an hour." Emma nodded, though she sensed his distraction. "You know, if you need to handle business matters, I can continue reviewing the vendor files on my own." Daniel seemed about to refuse, then reconsidered. "Actually, if you wouldn't mind, there's a call I should probably take. Vivian can show you the audio-visual setup while I step away." "Of course," Emma assured him. "This is your job, I understand completely." 20 minutes later, Emma was deep in conversation with the audio-visual technician about lighting configurations when Vivian hurried over, her professional composure slightly rattled. "Mr. Harrison needs to leave unexpectedly," she informed. "Emma, he asked me to provide you with all the remaining details and answer any questions. Is everything okay?" Emma asked, concerned by the assistant's tense expression. Vivian hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There's been a leak to the press. Someone's claiming to have evidence that Harrison Innovations' new solar technology isn't as sustainable as advertised. It's complete nonsense, but the stock is already taking a hit." Emma's eyes widened. Corporate drama and stock market fluctuations were far outside her experience. "That sounds serious." "Daniel will handle it," Vivian said with the confidence of someone who had witnessed her boss navigate countless crises. "In the meantime, he wanted me to make sure you have everything you need to proceed with the event planning." For the remainder of the afternoon, Emma immersed herself in learning every aspect of the fundraiser. Vivian proved Toby an invaluable resource, patiently explaining traditions and expectations that would have otherwise been foreign to Emma. The seating chart is particularly sensitive, Vivian explained as they reviewed floor plans in a small conference room. Corporate rivals who donate to the same cause still don't want to dine at the same table. And some donors expect recognition while others prefer anonymity. It's like a chess game, Emma observed, studying the partially completed chart. Exactly, Vivian agreed. Daniel usually handles this personally, but given the current situation, she trailed off, checking her phone. Speaking of which, he's asking if you can meet him at his office downtown at 6. There's something important he needs to discuss. The Harrison Innovations headquarters was an architectural marvel of glass and sustainable materials, its solar-integrated facade gleaming in the early evening light. Emma parked the SUV in the visitors section, feeling distinctly out of place, despite her professional attire. The security guard checked her ID, then directed her to a private elevator that whisked her directly to the executive floor. The doors opened to reveal a minimalist reception area where Vivian waited. "He's on a call, but asked me to bring you in as soon as you arrived," she explained, leading Emma through sleek corridors to a corner office with breathtaking views of the city. Daniel was standing behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his expression more serious than Emma had ever seen it. He acknowledged her with a nod as Vivian quietly closed the door, leaving them alone. "I understand the concerns, Senator, but I can assure you the allegations are completely unfounded," he was saying, his voice calm but firm. "My team is preparing a comprehensive response with independently verified data. Yes, I'd be happy to. Meet with the committee. Thank you for your support." He ended the call with a deep sigh, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that somehow humanized him, making him seem less like a billionaire CEO and more like a person under pressure. "I apologize for the interruption to our planning," he said, motioning for Emma to take a seat in one of the sleek chairs facing his desk. "Something unexpected has come up." "Vivian mentioned a press leak," Emma replied carefully. "I hope it's being resolved." Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "She's not usually so forthcoming with new staff." "I think she was trying to explain your sudden departure," Emma said. "Well, she's right. There's been an accusation that our latest solar technology contains materials sourced from environmentally destructive mining operations." His jaw tightened. "It's completely false, but that doesn't stop the damage to our reputation and stock value." Emma nodded, unsure why he was sharing these corporate concerns with her. "I understand this must be taking priority. If you need to, postpone the fundraiser." "That's actually what I wanted to discuss," Daniel interrupted, his expression changing. "The fundraiser is more important than ever now. We need to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to the community." He rose and moved to the window, his silhouette outlined against the darkening sky. "But there's something you should know, Emma, something that might affect your willingness to continue in this role." Emma felt a sudden chill. "What is it?" Daniel turned to face her, his expression grave. "The leak came from my ex-wife, Claudia, and she's claiming to have evidence that I've been using the Children's Hospital fundraiser to launder money and avoid taxes." Emma's breath caught. "That's absurd." The words escaped before she could consider them. A flicker of surprise crossed Daniel's face at her immediate defense. "Yes, it is, but it's a serious accusation that will draw scrutiny to every aspect of the event, including you." "Me?" Emma echoed. "Your sudden hiring could be portrayed as suspicious," Daniel explained, returning to his seat. "A single mother with financial troubles, no event planning experience, given a high-paying position with access to donor information." He grimaced. Claudia's lawyers could try to paint it as part of a larger scheme. Emma felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her. The opportunity that had seemed like unexpected good fortune now appeared fraught with complications she hadn't anticipated. "I understand if you want to withdraw," Daniel said quietly. "I can arrange a generous severance package, the full fee we discussed, plus an additional amount for the inconvenience." Emma sat perfectly still, processing this sudden turn of events. The practical part of her, the part that had navigated divorce, financial hardship, and single parenthood, screamed to take the money and run, to avoid entanglement in a wealthy ex-couple's bitter battle. But another part, perhaps the same instinct that had led her to stop and help a stranger with a flat tire, rebelled at the thought. "What happens to the children's hospital if the fundraiser fails?" she asked. Daniel looked startled by the question. "They'd lose significant funding for their new pediatric cancer wing." Emma nodded, making her decision. "Then I'm staying. These accusations have nothing to do with the good the event will do for children who need help." For a moment, Daniel simply stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "You continue to surprise me, Emma Matthews." The days leading up to the fundraiser passed in a whirlwind of activity. Emma threw herself into the preparations with the same methodical efficiency she applied to balancing work and motherhood. She arrived at the Grand Meridian each morning at 8, armed with her growing binder of notes and a determination that impressed even the most seasoned vendors. By Wednesday, she had reorganized the seating chart to minimize corporate rivalries, while maximizing potential donations, personally contacted each auction donor to confirm details and revised the evening's schedule to include a 5-minute video featuring children who had benefited from the hospital's care. "The video editor says it's one of the most moving pieces they've ever produced," Emma informed Daniel during their daily afternoon meeting. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, mornings for vendor coordination, afternoons for briefing Daniel on progress and decisions. "That was entirely your initiative," Daniel acknowledged, leaning back in his chair. They were meeting in a small conference room at the hotel, surrounded by Emma's meticulously organized planning materials. "It's going to change the tone of the entire event for the better." Emma allowed herself a moment of pride. "I also spoke with the florist about incorporating artwork from the children's ward into the centerpieces. Each table will feature framed drawings from the patients surrounded by the floral arrangements. The hospital coordinator thinks it will be a wonderful surprise for the doctors and nurses attending." Daniel studied her with undisguised admiration. "You've transformed this event in less than a week." "I've just added a few personal touches," Emma demurred, though she knew her contributions had gone well beyond that. "You've added heart," Daniel corrected. "Something these corporate galas often lack." The sincerity in his voice made Emma glance up from her notes, meeting his gaze. In the days they'd worked together, something had shifted between them, a growing mutual respect that occasionally hinted at deeper possibilities. Emma had become adept at pushing those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. "Any update on the situation with your ex-wife?" she asked, deliberately changing the subject. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "Our legal team issued a comprehensive statement refuting her claims. The independent certification of our material sourcing has helped steady the stock price, but the tax evasion allegations are proving more persistent." "Will it affect Saturday's event?" "Only in the most beneficial way," Daniel replied with grim humor. "Nothing motivates the wealthy to demonstrate their charitable nature quite like public scrutiny. We've actually had a surge in last-minute ticket purchases." Emma smiled despite the seriousness of the situation. "Silver linings, I suppose." Their meeting was interrupted by a knock at the door. Vivian entered, her usual composure slightly frayed. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that requires immediate attention," she said, addressing Daniel. "The Westbrook Foundation is threatening to pull their donation unless their CEO is moved to the head table." Daniel frowned. "The seating chart was finalized yesterday. Moving them now would require rearranging at least 3 other major donors." "I'll handle it," Emma said, already reaching for her laptop. "The Westbrooks and the Langleys have daughters at the same private school. I'll seat them together and move the hospital board director to balance the Chen Group table." Daniel and Vivian both stared at her. How do you know these people's personal connections? Vivian asked, impressed. Emma shrugged. I listen. Mrs. Westbrook mentioned her daughter's lacrosse tournament when she called about dietary restrictions, and Mr. Langley's assistant talked about the same tournament when confirming their RSVP. Daniel laughed, a genuine warm sound that had become more frequent over the days they'd worked together. And this is why you're perfect for this job. Speaking of jobs, Vivian interjected, her expression turning serious. Channel 5 News is running a segment tonight on the allegations against Harrison Innovations. They've requested an interview. Daniel's expression hardened. Declined, obviously. They've also requested comment from the Children's Hospital and several major donors, Vivian continued. The news director specifically mentioned the upcoming fundraiser. Emma felt her stomach tighten. After days of focused work, the external threats to the event's success were suddenly pressing in again. I need to make some calls, Daniel said, standing abruptly. Emma, can you continue with the final preparations? I trust your judgment on any decisions that need to be made. Of course, she assured him, though concern lingered even after he and Vivian had departed. That evening, Emma arrived home later than usual. Her mind still churning with logistics and contingency plans. She found Lily at the kitchen table, laptop, open, surrounded by textbooks. You're just in time, Lily said, closing a particularly thick biology tome. I was about to order pizza. How's the Billionaire world today? Emma smiled tiredly, setting down her bulging work binder. Complex. How was school? Interesting, Lily replied, her tone suggesting more than the casual word conveyed. Ms. Rivera nominated me for the summer research program at Westlake University, the one we couldn't afford before. She says with my grades and their commendation, I might qualify for a full scholarship. Emma's fatigue vanished, replaced by a surge of maternal pride. Lily, that's wonderful. When did this happen? She told me after AP Biology, Lily said, her excitement breaking through her teenage attempt at nonchalance. But there's something else, something weird. Emma raised an eyebrow, waiting. The program director who's reviewing applications. It's Daniel Harrison's sister, Olivia Harrison Caldwell. She's an neurobiologist at Westlake. The coincidence was too specific to be chance. Emma felt a complex mixture of emotions. Gratitude. The doors were opening for Lily. Discomfort at the possibility that Daniel had orchestrated it. Uncertainty about his motivations, if he had. That is quite a coincidence, she said carefully. Lily fixed her with the penetrating stare that had been unnerving adults since she was a toddler. Is it? Mom, has Daniel Harrison been asking about me? About my interests? Emma sighed, sinking into a kitchen chair. We've talked about you, yes. He knows you're interested in neuroscience. But I never asked him for any favors, Lily. You have to believe that. I do, Lily said immediately. But I think he's doing it anyway. She hesitated, then added, would that be so terrible, using connections to open doors? It was a question Emma had been wrestling with herself. Her fierce independence had always been both shield and sword, protecting them from disappointment, fighting for their future on her own terms. The idea of accepting help, of following someone else to smooth their path, challenged principles she'd lived by for years. You earned that nomination with your hard work, she said finally. If Daniel's connection provides an opportunity for that work to be recognized, then perhaps we should view it as fortunate timing rather than charity. Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with this framing. There's also been some stuff online about him. Accusations from high-sex wife. Is that affecting the fundraiser? Emma shouldn't have been surprised by Lily's awareness, but it still caught her off guard. You've been researching him? Of course I have, Lily replied matter-of-factly. You're working closely with him, and it's not every day a billionaire. CEO enters our lives. I wanted to know who he really is. And what have you concluded? Emma asked, genuinely curious about her daughter's perspective. Lily considered, her expression thoughtful beyond her 15 years. I think he's a complicated person who's genuinely trying to do good things. His company has developed technology that's making clean energy more accessible. His foundation supports education and healthcare initiatives that actually help people. His ex-wife seems bitter about their divorce, but there's no real evidence for her accusations. The assessment was balanced and insightful, exactly what Emma had come to expect from her remarkable daughter. The fundraiser is still proceeding, Emma confirmed. In fact, ticket sales have increased since the news broke. Because people want to show support, Lily suggested, or because they're curious about potential scandal, Emma said dryly. Either way, the children's hospital benefits. Their conversation was interrupted by a text message alert. Emma checked her phone to find a message from Daniel. Sorry to disturb your evening. Channel 5 just ran their segment. Better than expected, but there may be press at the venue tomorrow. Can you call me when convenient to discuss security adjustments? Emma excused herself to make the call, stepping onto their small balcony for privacy. Daniel answered immediately. I'm sorry to interrupt your family time, he began. It's fine, she assured him. What happened with the news segment? They presented both sides, rather than simply repeating Claudia's accusations, Daniel explained, sounding relieved. The hospital administrator's statement about our decade-long support was particularly helpful. But now, Claudia's lawyer is suggesting they may make an appearance at the event itself. Emma leaned against the railing, watching as lights came on across the apartment complex. What would that achieve? Drama, Daniel replied, his voice tinged with resigned bitterness. Claudia has always had a flair for public confrontation. During our divorce, she showed up at a board meeting with photographers in tow. Can security prevent her from entering? It's complicated. She's still on the board of several charitable foundations that regularly attend. Barring her could create more negative publicity than allowing her to come. Emma considered the problem practically. Then we control the environment. We seat her far from you, keep her occupied with attentive staff, and ensure photographers are focused on the children's hospital representatives and major donors. Daniel's laugh held genuine appreciation. You're remarkably strategic, Emma Matthews. I'm a single mother with a teenage daughter, she replied lightly. Strategic thinking is a survival skill. After finalizing plans for enhanced security and press management, Emma returned to the kitchen to find Lily ordering pizza online. Everything okay with the billionaire crisis? Lily asked, only half joking. Just some additional security considerations. For tomorrow, Emma replied, deliberately keeping her tone casual. Nothing we can't handle. As they settled into their evening routine, pizza, homework review, planning for the next day, Emma found herself reflecting on how quickly their lives had changed. Just a week ago, her most pressing concern had been how to afford car repairs and Lily's advanced placement courses. Now she was managing a high-profile charity event amid corporate accusations and media scrutiny. The strangest part wasn't the dramatic shift in circumstances, but how readily she had adapted to it. The skills that had helped her navigate single motherhood on a tight budget, efficiency, problem-solving, calm under pressure, translated surprisingly well to managing wealthy donors and coordinating elaborate events. Friday morning dawned grey and drizzly, the weather matching Emma's mood as she drove to the hotel for the final day of preparations. The event setup would begin at noon, with vendors arriving throughout the afternoon. Security protocols had been enhanced following last night's conversation with Daniel, and Emma had prepared detailed briefing notes for every staff member. As she walked through the hotel lobby, Vivian hurried to intercept her, tablet in hand, and expression tense. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "The event photographer just cancelled. Family emergency." Emma absorbed this news calmly. "Do we have contacts for backup photographers?" "That's the issue," Vivian explained. "With the press interest in the allegations, Daniel wants someone trusted, not just any available photographer who might be tempted to sell unflattering images to tabloids." "I understand," Emma nodded, already mentally reviewing options. What? About the photographer who did the children's hospital promotional materials? The ones in the brochure were excellent. Vivian brightened. That's Catherine Chen. She's worked with the foundation before. See if she's available, Emma suggested. And if not, I know a photography professor at the community college who might be willing to help on short notice. I met him at a bookstore event last year. As Vivian made the calls, Emma proceeded to the ballroom where the transformation was already underway. Florists were arranging elaborate centerpieces featuring the children's artwork. Audio-visual technicians were checking lighting and sound, and hotel staff were setting up the silent auction displays. Daniel arrived shortly after noon, immaculately, dressed as always, but with subtle signs of strain around his eyes. He found Emma directing the placement of the head table on the raised platform. "You look completely in your element," he observed, a note of admiration in his voice. "I'm enjoying it more than I expected," Emma admitted. "There's satisfaction in seeing all the pieces come together." They walked the perimeter of the ballroom together, reviewing final details and making minor adjustments. The easy rapport they had developed over the week was evident in the way they anticipated each other's concerns and finished each other's thoughts. "Catherine Chen can do the photography," Emma informed him as they examined the auction displays. "Vivian reached her between shoots, and she's rearranged her schedule." "Excellent," Daniel nodded, clearly relieved. "Listen, Emma. Regardless of how tomorrow goes, I want you to know that your work this week has been extraordinary. You've transformed what would have been a standard charity dinner into something meaningful." The sincerity in his voice made Emma pause. "Thank you. That means a lot." A moment of charged silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken possibilities. Daniel seemed about to say something more when his phone rang. He checked the display and frowned. "My lawyer," he explained. "I should take this." As he stepped away to take the call, Emma returned to her clipboard and vendor checklist, deliberately focusing on the tasks at hand rather than the complex emotions that had been developing throughout the week. Whatever personal connection might be forming between them would have to wait until after the fundraiser. By evening, the ballroom had been transformed into an elegant wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in midnight blue, each centerpiece a perfect marriage of sophisticated floral arrangements and charming children's artwork. The silent auction displays showcased everything from luxury vacation packages to one-of-a-kind artwork, all benefiting the children's hospital. As the last vendors departed and hotel staff made final adjustments, Emma stood in the center of the room, mentally reviewing every detail for the 100th time. Tomorrow would test all her organizational skills and quick thinking, not just in executing the event as planned, but in managing whatever unexpected challenges might arise from the media attention and potential appearance of Daniel's ex-wife. "It's perfect," Daniel's voice came from behind her. He had returned from his legal consultation looking somewhat relieved. "Better than any previous year. Let's hope it all goes as smoothly tomorrow," Emma replied. "With you running things, have complete confidence." He hesitated, then added, "Would you have dinner with me tonight to celebrate the completion of preparations and to discuss any final details?" Emma considered the invitation. The professional in her saw the practical value in a final coordination meeting. The woman in her, the part she'd kept carefully contained throughout their working relationship, recognized the potential personal implications. "I should get home to Lily," she began. "She's welcome to join us," Daniel offered immediately. "In fact, I'd enjoy the chance to hear more about her interest in neuroscience. My sister has been asking about her since I mentioned her project." The mention of his sister reminded Emma of Lily's earlier revelation about the summer research program. She hesitated, then decided to address it directly. "Did you speak to your sister about Lily's academic interests?" she asked carefully. Daniel had the grace to look slightly abashed. I might have mentioned that the daughter of someone I know has exceptional talent in that area. Olivia runs the summer program and is always looking for promising students. He met her gaze directly. I didn't ask for special treatment, Emma. I simply made a connection between two people who might benefit from knowing each other. His explanation was reasonable, and yet Emma remained somewhat uncomfortable with the ease with which he could open doors that had seemed firmly closed to them before. Lily mentioned that her teacher nominated her for the program, she said. She's very excited about the possibility. She deserves the opportunity, Daniel replied simply. Talent should be nurtured, regardless of financial circumstances. The sentiment was one Emma couldn't argue with, though the practical implementation had always been her challenge as a single mother with limited resources. So, Daniel prompted, dinner with both of you? It would give me a chance to answer any questions Lily might have about the program or my sister's work. Put that way, the invitation was difficult to refuse. Let me call her and check, Emma conceded, reaching for her phone. Lily, unsurprisingly, was enthusiastic about the prospect of dinner with Daniel Harrison. Are you kidding? Of course he want to come. I have like 1,000 questions about the solar panel technology and his sister's neuroscience research. And so, as twilight descended on Meadowbrook, Emma found herself seated across from Daniel at Terrazzo, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, with Lily beside her peppering Destruct, their billionaire dinner companion, with impressively technical questions about sustainable energy and neural regeneration. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, the October sky a brilliant blue that seemed to promise success. Emma arrived at the Grand Meridian at 8, having slept fitfully despite her exhaustion. Today would be the culmination of a week's work, and potentially much more. The dinner with Daniel and Lily the previous evening had shifted something fundamental in their relationship. Watching him engage with her daughter, treating Lily's questions with genuine respect, explaining complex scientific concepts without condescension, encouraging her ambitions without platitudes, had revealed dimensions to Daniel that professional interactions hadn't shown. You have a remarkable daughter, he told Emma as they'd parted for the night. She reminds me of my sister at the Taj. Brilliant, curious, unstoppable when interested in something. The compliment had warmed Emma more deeply than any praise of her own abilities. And when Daniel had briefly touched her hand while saying, "Good night," the connection had felt like more than casual contact, a tentative question, perhaps, about possibilities beyond their professional relationship. But now, as Emma strode through the hotel lobby in her newly purchased black cocktail, dress and sensible heels, her own concession to practicality, those personal considerations had to be set aside. Today was about executing a flawless event that would benefit children in need, regardless of the corporate drama surrounding it. The ballroom was already humming with activity. Hotel staff setting tables, technicians making final adjustments to lighting and sound, security personnel reviewing protocols for the evening. Emma moved through it all with calm authority, clipboard in hand, confirming details and solving minor crises before they could develop into major problems. The governor's security team needs to do an advanced sweep, the head of hotel security informed her around 10. Standard procedure, but they want access an hour before we planned. Emma quickly rearranged the vendor arrival schedule, prioritizing essentials that needed to be in place before the security sweep. When the floral delivery arrived with arrangements in burgundy rather than the specified midnight blue, she negotiated a rapid correction while authorizing backup centerpieces from the hotel's own floral department as contingency. You're handling this like a seasoned professional, Vivian observed, appearing at Emma's side with much-needed coffee around noon. Daniel's been watching you work. He's impressed. Emma glanced across the ballroom, where Daniel stood with the hotel manager, reviewing security arrangements. He caught her eye and smiled, a small private gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through her despite the room's efficient air conditioning. The press started arriving, Vivian continued, lowering her voice. 2 local stations and a reporter from the city paper. They're being kept in the designated media area for now. And Claudia? Emma asked quietly. No sign yet, but her name is on the final guest list. She RSVP'd this morning. Emma nodded, having anticipated this development. We'll proceed with the plan we discussed. Keep her at table 14, surrounded by hospital board members who know the situation. Make sure photographers are directed toward the children's artwork and major donors, not potential drama. The afternoon raced by in a blur of last-minute adjustments and final preparations. By 5 o'clock, Emma had changed into her evening attire in the small office the hotel had provided. A sophisticated navy blue gown that Lily had insisted she splurge on when they'd gone shopping midweek. You need to look the part, her practical daughter had argued. It's an investment. Now, standing before the mirror, Emma hardly recognized herself. The dress flattered her figure in ways her usual practical attire never did, and she'd taken extra care with her makeup and hair, which fell in soft waves around her shoulders instead of its usual ponytail. A knock at the door interrupted her self-assessment. "Come in," she called, expecting Vivian with last-minute updates. Instead, Daniel entered, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. He stopped abruptly at the sight of her, his expression shifting from professional to something much more personal. "Emma," he said simply, though the way he spoke her name conveyed volumes. "Is everything all right?" she asked, suddenly aware of her accelerated heartbeat. "Everything's perfect," he assured her, regaining his composure. "I just wanted to give you something before guests begin arriving." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Emma froze, uncomfortable possibilities racing through her mind. Sensing her discomfort, Daniel laughed softly. "It's not what you're thinking. It's a thank you gift, and something appropriate for tonight's event." Cautiously, Emma accepted the box and opened it to reveal a pair of sapphire earrings, elegant and understated, despite what she was certain was their considerable value. "Daniel, I can't accept these," she began, though the earrings were undeniably beautiful. "They belong to the foundation," he explained. "We keep a selection of appropriate jewelry for key staff at major events. They're not a personal gift, just on loan for the evening." The explanation eased her concerns somewhat, though she suspected it wasn't entirely truthful. Nevertheless, the earrings would complete her outfit perfectly, and refusing might create awkwardness before an already challenging evening. "Thank you," she said simply, removing her small silver studs and replacing them with the sapphires. "They're beautiful." Daniel watched as she put them on, his expression unreadable. "They suit you," he said finally. "Like this role suits you." Before Emma could respond to the layered meaning in his words, Vivian appeared at the door, tablet in hand, and expression tense. "Guests are beginning to arrive," she announced, "and Claudia just pulled up with a man we've identified as a photographer. From the city tabloid." Daniel's expression hardened momentarily before he regained his composure. "We're ready," he said firmly. "Emma has prepared for every contingency." "Then let's welcome your guests," Emma said with more confidence than she felt, moving toward the door. Whatever personal matters simmered between them would have to wait. The evening's challenges were about to begin. The next 3 hours passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of social logistics. Emma moved through the growing crowd with practiced ease, directing staff, greeting key donors, and ensuring every detail aligned with their meticulous plans. The ballroom filled with Meadowbrook's elite, corporate leaders, politicians, old money families, and newly wealthy entrepreneurs, all dressed in their finest and ready to be seen supporting a worthy cause. Daniel worked the room with the smooth confidence of long practice, moving from one group to another, expressing genuine appreciation for their support, while subtly encouraging higher bids on auction items. From a distance, Emma observed his natural charisma, the way he made each person feel valued and heard, regardless of their net worth or social standing. At precisely 7:30, the video Emma had commissioned began playing on large screens throughout the ballroom. Conversations hushed as images appeared of children receiving treatment at the hospital, their brave smiles and resilient spirits captured in intimate moments. Parents spoke with raw emotion about the care their children had received. Doctors explained groundbreaking treatments made possible by previous fundraisers, and finally, a 7-year-old leukemia survivor named Sophie addressed the camera directly. "Before I got sick, I wanted to be a princess," she said, with the directness only children can manage. "But now I want to be a doctor, because doctors are the real heroes. They saved my life, and I want to save other kids too." As the video ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The silence that followed was broken by spontaneous applause that quickly grew into a standing ovation. Daniel found Emma near the back of the room and leaned close to whisper, "That was brilliant. You've changed the entire atmosphere of the event." She smiled, genuinely moved by the response. "I just showed them the real purpose behind all this glamour." The dinner portion of the evening proceeded smoothly, with Emma personally checking each table to ensure satisfaction. She had just finished speaking with the governor's aide when she spotted her, Claudia Harrison, Daniel's ex-wife, making her entrance nearly 2 hours after the event began. Even from a distance, Claudia commanded attention. Tall, willowy, with platinum blonde hair and a blood-red gown that seemed designed to stand out against the sea of darker evening wear. She moved with deliberate confidence, the photographer at her side documenting her arrival. Emma immediately implemented their contingency plan, signaling to staff who smoothly intercepted Claudia and guided her to her designated table. Security discreetly redirected the photographer to the media area, while Emma herself approached Daniel, who was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of surgery. "She's here," Emma murmured during a pause in their discussion. "Table 14. As planned, the photographer has been moved to the media area." Daniel nodded almost imperceptibly, continuing his conversation without missing a beat. Only the slight tension in his shoulders betrayed his awareness of his ex-wife's arrival. For the next hour, Emma maintained a careful balance, keeping Claudia engaged with appropriate conversation partners while ensuring Daniel remained surrounded by key supporters. The strategy seemed to be working. Claudia remained at her table, apparently content to observe rather than disrupt. As the auction concluded with record-breaking bids, Emma allowed herself to relax slightly. The event had exceeded fundraising expectations despite, or perhaps because of, the surrounding controversy. Daniel was preparing to deliver closing remarks, the children's hospital director at his side, when Emma noticed Claudia rising from her table with deliberate slowness. The timing was strategic. Daniel was just ascending to the small stage, all eyes and cameras turning in his direction. Emma moved quickly through the crowd, intending to intercept Claudia before she could create a scene. But the crush of people slowed her progress. Daniel had just reached the microphone when Claudia's voice cut through the ambient conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, her tone sharp enough to command attention, "before my ex-husband delivers his practiced speech about generosity and compassion, perhaps you should know where your money is really going." A collective intake of breath swept the room as heads turned toward her. Daniel froze momentarily, then continued to the microphone with remarkable composure. "Claudia," he acknowledged calmly, "so glad you could support the Children's Hospital tonight. Your donation is appreciated." The simple response, neither defensive nor confrontational, seemed to momentarily unbalance her. Cameras swiveled between them, capturing the tense exchange. "This isn't about the hospital," Claudia countered, taking a step forward. "It's about transparency. These good people deserve to know that while they open their wallets for sick children, you're using this foundation to shelter millions in corporate profits from taxation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma finally reached Claudia's side and spoke quietly but firmly. "Mrs. Harrison, This isn't the appropriate forum for personal grievances. The children we're helping tonight deserve better." Claudia glanced at Emma dismissively. "And who exactly are you?" "Emma Matthews, event coordinator," she replied evenly, "and someone who cares deeply about the success of this fundraiser." "Oh, the mysterious new hire." Claudia's laugh held no humor. "Another of Daniel's projects? He does love to play savior to struggling single mothers." The deliberate cruelty of the comment struck Emma like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure. "This evening has raised over $2 million for children fighting cancer," she stated, her voice clear enough to be heard by those nearby. "That's what matters tonight." From the stage, Daniel spoke into the microphone, his voice steady. "If I could have everyone's attention, please. Tonight isn't about corporate politics or personal disagreements. It's about Sophie, the 7-year-old you met in our video, and hundreds of children like her." He gestured toward the back of the ballroom, where, in a surprise Emma had arranged, Sophie herself stood with her parents and doctor. The crowd turned, cameras following, effectively shifting attention away from Claudia. "Sophie just completed her final round of treatment last week," Daniel continued as the young girl gave a shy wave. "The advanced equipment your donations funded 3 years ago played a crucial role in her recovery. That's the real story tonight. The strategic redirection worked beautifully." Applause broke out as Sophie was escorted to the stage, her small, a hand trustingly placed in Daniel's as he helped her up the steps. Claudia was left standing alone, her moment of disruption overshadowed by the powerful visual of the child whose life had been saved. Emma watched as Sophie whispered something to Daniel, who smiled and adjusted the microphone to her height. "I just wanted to say thank you," the little girl said simply. "Not just to the doctors and nurses, but to all of you for helping kids like me get better." The standing ovation was immediate and heartfelt. Cameras flashed, capturing the genuine moment that would undoubtedly make headlines instead of Claudia's accusations. Emma caught Daniel's eye across the room, and in that moment of shared triumph, something profound passed between them, an understanding that transcended their professional relationship. The remainder of the evening proceeded without further incident. Claudia departed shortly after her failed attempt at disruption, leaving the attendees to focus on the true purpose of the gathering. As guests began to leave around 11, the fundraising total was announced, $2.7 million, a record for the annual event. Emma stood near the exit, accepting congratulations and farewells from departing guests, when Daniel finally reached her side. He looked simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. "We did it," he said simply. "The children did it," Emma corrected gently. "Sophie was the perfect ambassador." "Sophie was your idea," Daniel reminded her, "as was bringing the actual families. You understood what this event needed to be about." Around them, staff had begun the process of dismantling decorations and clearing tables. The evening was ending, and with it, Emma realized, her temporary position. The thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. "Thank you," Daniel said softly, his gaze holding hers. "Not just for tonight, but for seeing me as a person, not just a wallet or a corporate entity." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Emma. Before she could respond, Vivian approached with urgent news about a potential additional donation, pulling Daniel away for a final negotiation. "We'll talk later," he promised Emma. As he followed his assistant, left alone amid the receding elegance of the evening, Emma removed the borrowed sapphire earrings and carefully placed them in their velvet box. The night had been a professional triumph beyond anything she could have imagined a week ago. Yet as she watched Daniel across the room, engaged in animated conversation with hospital administrators, she wondered what tomorrow would bring when the spell of this extraordinary week finally broke. Sunday morning arrived with the gentle stillness that follows significant events. Emma woke in her own bed, in her modest apartment, the glamour of the previous evening feeling almost dreamlike in the light of day. On her nightstands, at the velvet box containing the sapphire earrings, Daniel had insisted she keep them as a memento when they'd said good night. "They were always meant for you," he'd said quietly, as they'd stood in the hotel parking garage after the last guests had departed. "Not alone. A gift to remember what you accomplished." Now, as she prepared coffee in her small kitchen, Emma reflected on the extraordinary week that had transformed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. The financial aspect was significant. The promised payment had already been deposited in her account, resolving their immediate concerns. But something more profound had shifted as well. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, casual in jeans and a sweater, looking unexpectedly nervous. "Good morning," he said, offering a smile that held both confidence and vulnerability. "I hope it's not too early for a visit." "Not at all," Emma replied, suddenly aware of her simple Sunday appearance. Worn jeans, an old sweater, hair pulled back in its usual practical ponytail. "Would you like coffee?" As they settled at her small kitchen table, the contrast between their worlds was apparent, yet somehow less significant than it had seemed a week ago. Daniel glanced around the apartment with genuine interest, noting Lily's science awards displayed proudly on the wall and the overflowing bookshelves that spoke of their shared love of reading. "I came to talk about the future," he said finally, meeting her gaze directly. "Last night was extraordinary, and not just because of the fundraiser's success." Emma nodded, understanding the layers in his statement. "It was a remarkable evening." "You're remarkable, Emma," Daniel said simply. "Your intelligence, your efficiency, your heart. The foundation needs someone like you permanently, not just for crisis management." She hadn't expected a job offer, though perhaps she should have. "You're offering me a position?" "Director of Community Engagement," Daniel confirmed, "overseeing all our events, but more importantly, ensuring they maintain the human connection you brought to last night's fundraiser. The salary would be commensurate with the responsibility, significantly more than what we agreed upon for this week." Emma absorbed this unexpected development, recognizing it for the life-changing opportunity it was. Financial security, meaningful work, a chance to make genuine difference in her community. "And what about us?" she asked quietly, addressing the unspoken question between them. Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "That's a separate matter entirely. The job offer stands regardless, but I hope you'll give me a chance to explore what might be possible between us. No pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other beyond extraordinary circumstances." Before Emma could respond, Lily emerged from her bedroom, stopping short at the sight of their visitor. Her expression shifted quickly from surprise to knowing assessment as she observed their hands touching on the table. "Good morning, Daniel," she said, her tone deliberately casual despite the early hour and unexpected guest. "Are you staying for breakfast? Mom makes amazing Sunday pancakes." The simple domestic invitation hung in the air, representing far more than a meal. Emma met Daniel's questioning gaze and smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting as new possibilities unfolded before them. "He's staying," she confirmed, squeezing Daniel's hand gently. "We have a lot to talk about."